You gave $4.7 billion to a waitress. Brandon Sterling's fist slammed the mahogany table so hard the crystal glasses exploded off the edge and shattered against the marble floor. His face twisted into something inhuman, veins bulging at his temples, spit flying from his lips. A waitress who served him soup? This is insane! Victoria grabbed his arm. Brandon, control yourself. He shoved her away. Don't tell me to control myself. That money is ours. We are his blood. The lawyer didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't move a single muscle. Your father was very specific, Mr. Sterling. Very specific indeed. He was dying. He had a tumor eating his brain. He didn't know what he was doing. Pancreatic cancer. Mr. Sterling, not brain cancer. Your father's mind was perfectly clear until the very end. I have 37 video testimonies and 3 independent psychiatric evaluations to prove it. Brandon lunged across the table. 2 security guards caught him mid-air. I'll destroy her, he screamed. I'll destroy that woman if it's the last thing I do. Somewhere across Chicago, Grace Mitchell was serving coffee to a truck driver and had no idea that her entire life was about to explode. Before we begin this incredible journey, I invite you to subscribe to our channel and follow this story until the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The phone call that started everything came at 3:47 in the morning. William Sterling was already awake. He hadn't slept in 11 days. Not since Dr. Harrison had looked him in the eyes and said the words that no amount of money could fight. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I'm sorry, William. 3 to 6 months, maybe less. William had sat in that office for 20 minutes without speaking. The doctor had waited. What else could he do? Finally, William had asked, is there anything, any treatment, any trial? I'll pay whatever it costs. If there were anything I would tell you. I'm sorry. Sorry. Everyone was sorry. Sorry didn't stop the cancer from spreading through his body like fire through dry brush. Now, 11 days later, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Brandon's name glowed in the darkness. William answered. It's 4 in the morning. I know what time it is. Brandon's voice was sharp as broken glass. Victoria and I have been talking. We need to discuss the transition plan. William closed his eyes. The transition plan. For the company. For the assets. We can't wait around while things progress. The shareholders are nervous. The board is asking questions. We need to show them stability. Your father is dying, Brandon. That's what's progressing. Your father is dying. A pause. Then, I know that, Dad. But business doesn't stop for death. You taught me that. I taught you that. You taught me everything. Sentiment is weakness. Emotion is liability. Close the deal before someone else does. Your words. Your lessons. William felt something crack inside his chest. Not the cancer. Something deeper. And that's why you're calling me at 4 in the morning, to close the deal on my death. Don't be dramatic. I'm trying to protect what you built, what we all built together. What you built, Brandon, you've never built anything in your life. You've inherited, you've managed, you've spent, but built. Tell me one thing you've built from nothing. Silence. That's what I thought. Fine. Brandon's voice went cold. Be sentimental. Be weak. But when this company falls apart because you were too proud to plan properly, don't blame me. How much time do I have left, Brandon? What? How much time do I have left? The doctor told me. Did you even bother to ask? Another silence. Longer this time. I assumed you would tell us when you were ready. 3 to 6 months. Maybe less. Your father has 3 to 6 months to live, and you haven't asked a single question about how I'm feeling, whether I'm in pain, whether I'm afraid. Not one question. Dad. Good night, Brandon. William hung up before his son could respond. He sat in the darkness for a long time, watching the lights of Chicago flicker below like the last embers of a dying fire. 60 years of building an empire. 2 children who saw him as an obstacle to their inheritance. This was his legacy. The phone buzzed again 2 hours later. Victoria this time. "Daddy, I just spoke with Brandon. He said you were upset." "Did he tell you why?" "He said you were being emotional." "Daddy, we're all stressed. This is hard for everyone." "Is it?" "Of course it is. You're my father. I love you." "Then why are you calling me at 6 in the morning, Victoria? To tell me you love me? Or to talk about something else?" A pause. Then, "Well, since you mention it, Brandon and I are concerned about some of your recent decisions. The charitable donations have been excessive. The board is asking questions." "The board answers to me." "For now. But when things change, we need to make sure the company is protected, that the family is protected." "Protected from what?" "From uncertainty, from chaos, from people who might try to take advantage." William laughed. It was a hollow, bitter sound. "People who might try to take advantage. Like who, Victoria? Like you and your brother?" "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You haven't visited me in 3 months. You haven't called except to discuss money. You haven't asked once how I'm feeling or whether I need anything. And now you're calling at 6 in the morning to make sure the company is protected when I'm gone." "Daddy, I need to ask you something, Victoria, and I need you to answer honestly." "Of course." "If I gave everything to charity tomorrow, every dollar, every share, every building, would you still love me?" The silence on the other end told him everything he needed to know. "Goodbye, Victoria." He hung up. William sat alone in his penthouse, surrounded by art worth millions, and furniture that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. And he had never felt more empty in his entire life. That morning, William did something he hadn't done in 40 years. He went to church. St. Michael's on the near north side was quiet at 7 a.m. An old woman knelt near the altar, rosary beads clicking through her fingers. A young mother tried to keep her toddler from running down the aisle. A homeless man slept in the back pew and nobody bothered him. William sat in the middle row and stared at the crucifix above the altar. He thought about his father. Patrick Sterling had died 32 years ago with exactly $47 in his bank account. He'd been a bricklayer his whole life, hands like leather, back bent from decades of labor, a heart that never learned to close itself off from anyone in need. "Wealth isn't what you keep, son," Patrick used to say. "It's what you give away. That's the only treasure that follows you into the next life." William had spent 60 years proving his father wrong, accumulating, building, protecting. And now, facing death with nothing but money and children who wanted more of it, he wondered if Patrick had been right all along. "Excuse me." William looked up. The homeless man from the back pew was standing next to him. His clothes were filthy. His beard was matted. He smelled like sweat and garbage. "Can you spare some change? I haven't eaten since yesterday." William reached into his pocket and pulled out a $100 bill. He pressed it into the man's hand. The man stared at it, then at William, then at the bill again. "Is this real?" "It's real." "Why?" The question hit William like a punch to the chest. Why? He had billions of dollars. He gave away 100. And this man wanted to know why. "Because you asked," William said finally. "Because you're hungry. Because my father would have done the same thing." The man's eyes filled with tears. "God bless you, sir. God bless you." He shuffled away, clutching the bill like it might disappear. William watched him go and felt something shift inside his chest. That man had thanked him like he'd given him $1 million. Thanked him for $100 out of $4.7 billion. When was the last time anyone had thanked him for anything? When was the last time anyone had seen him as anything other than a source of money? The idea came to him slowly over the next 3 days. It started as a whisper, grew into a question, finally crystallized into something that felt almost like purpose. What if he tested them? Not his children, he already knew what they were made of. But the world, humanity, strangers. What if he stripped away everything that made him William Sterling and walked among people as nobody at all? Would anyone see him then? Would anyone care? He called Arthur Chen, his attorney for 31 years. I need your help with something unusual. Name it. I'm going to spend the next week pretending to be homeless. I want to see how people treat me when they think I have nothing. Arthur was quiet for a long moment. May I ask why? Because I need to know if kindness still exists. Real kindness. Not the kind you buy with donations and galas and tax deductions. The kind that costs something. The kind that expects nothing back. And if you don't find it, then my children deserve exactly what they're going to get. The transformation was easier than William expected. Old clothes from a thrift store, a week without shaving, dirt under his fingernails carefully applied, a shuffle in his step, a hunch in his shoulders. He stood before the mirror and barely recognized himself. The man staring back looked tired, broken, invisible, perfect. Night 1. The Drake Hotel. William had hosted his 50th birthday party here, his 60th, his 70th. The staff knew his name, his drink, his preferred suite. He walked through the front door in his disguise. The doorman's hand shot out before he made it 3 steps inside. Sir, you can't come in here. I just need to warm up for a minute. It's cold outside. This is a private establishment. I need you to leave, now. Please, just 5 minutes. The doorman grabbed his arm. I said leave, don't make me call the police. William looked into the man's eyes. Do you know who I am? Yeah. You're a bum who wandered into the wrong building. Now get out. The doorman's name was Christopher. William had given him a $500 tip last Christmas. Christopher had bowed and thanked him profusely. Now, Christopher shoved him toward the door like he was garbage. Move it! You're disturbing the guests! William stumbled onto the sidewalk. The door slammed behind him. He stood in the cold for a long moment processing what had just happened. Then he laughed. It was a sound without joy. Night 2. Chez Laurent, the finest French restaurant in Chicago. William had eaten here hundreds of times. The chef had personally prepared his meals. The sommelier knew his taste in wine better than his own children did. He walked in and approached the hostess stand. The woman behind it took one look at him and her face twisted with disgust. We don't serve your kind here. I just want some water. Please, I'm thirsty. There's a drinking fountain in the park, 3 blocks east. Please, I used to come here all the time. She laughed. Sure you did. And I'm the Queen of England. Get out before I call the manager. An older couple at a nearby table watched the exchange. The woman made a face like she'd smelled something rotten. The man wouldn't even look at him. Please, William said again. Just a glass of water. The hostess picked up the phone. Security. Yes, we have a situation at the front. William left before they could throw him out. Night 3. Sterling Tower. His own building. 47 floors of glass and steel. His name carved in granite above the entrance. The empire he'd built from nothing over 60 years. The security guard was young, new hire. William didn't recognize him. Can I help you, sir? I used to work in this building, long time ago. Just wanted to look around. The guard's hand moved to his radio. I'm going to need you to leave the premises. I helped build this place. Back in '64, I was on the foundation crew. The lie came easily, close enough to truth. The guard's face softened slightly. That's nice, sir, but I can't let you in. Company policy. Could I just sit in the lobby 5 minutes? It's cold out here. I'm sorry, I really am. But if my supervisor sees you, I'll lose my job. I've got a kid on the way. I can't risk it. William studied the young man's face. There was genuine regret there, genuine humanity. What's your name, son? Derek. Derek Williams. You're going to be a good father, Derek. I can tell. The young man blinked, surprised. Thank you, sir. Take care of that baby. William walked away. Derek Williams watched him go with something that looked almost like shame. Night 4. William sat on a bench in Grant Park, watching the city lights reflect off Lake Michigan. He was done. 4 nights of testing. 4 nights of being invisible, rejected, despised. The world he'd built wanted nothing to do with him the moment he couldn't prove his worth in dollars. He pulled out his phone and called Arthur. It's worse than I thought. Are you all right? Do you need me to send the car? I'm fine, just tired. Did you find what you were looking for? I found proof that humanity is dead, that kindness is a transaction, that people only see value in what you can give them. Arthur was quiet for a moment. That's a harsh verdict. It's the truth. Is there anywhere else you want to try one more test before you give up? William looked across the park. In the distance, a flickering neon sign caught his eye. Rosie's Diner. The kind of place he hadn't set foot in since he was 20 years old, with nothing but ambition and his father's work ethic. Maybe one more, he said. One more place. Where? Somewhere real. Rosie's Diner was nearly empty when William pushed through the door. A bell jingled overhead. The air smelled like coffee and fried onions and something he couldn't name. Something that felt almost like home. A heavy-set man behind the counter looked up, scowled, and looked away. We're closing in an hour. No loitering. William shuffled to a booth in the back and sat down. His bones ached. His chest felt tight. The cancer was moving faster than Dr. Harrison had predicted. He had maybe 2 months left. Maybe less. A shadow fell across the table. Can I get you something, sir? William looked up into the face of a black woman in her mid-30s. She had tired eyes, but they were warm. Her uniform was faded but clean. Her name tag said Grace. I don't have much money, William said. That's all right. Coffee's $1.50, free refills. I could use something hot. Grace glanced toward the counter where the heavy-set man was watching them with obvious displeasure. She leaned in slightly and lowered her voice. Look, we've got soup left over from dinner. Tomato. It's going in the trash anyway. You want some? I can't pay for soup. Did I ask you to pay? Something in her voice made William's throat tighten. Why would you do that? Because you look like you need it. That's enough reason for me. She walked away before he could respond. The man behind the counter intercepted her immediately. His voice was low, but carried in the empty diner. Grace, what the hell are you doing? Giving him the leftover soup, Ray. We don't feed every bum who wanders in here. He's not bothering anyone. He's bothering me. He's going to scare off customers. Grace looked around the empty diner. What customers? Don't get smart with me. I'm not getting smart. I'm asking a question. What customers are you worried about? There's nobody here. That's not the point. Then what is the point, Ray? That man is cold and hungry. We have soup that's going in the garbage. Explain to me why I shouldn't give it to him. Ray's face reddened. Because it's not your soup to give. Fine. Take it out of my tips. You're damn right I will. Then we don't have a problem, do we? She walked past him into the kitchen. Ray stared after her, then looked at William with pure hatred. You're gone in 1 hour, not a minute more. William nodded and said nothing. Grace returned 5 minutes later with a bowl of soup, 2 thick slices of bread, and a steaming cup of coffee. She set everything down gently, like she was handling something precious. Can I get you anything else? William looked at the food, at the bread, at this woman who had just sacrificed part of her income for a stranger who could give her nothing. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I can't pay you back. Your boss is angry. What do you get out of this? Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she slid into the booth across from him. My mama died when I was 19, cancer. She was sick for 2 years, and I watched people treat her like she was already gone. Like she didn't matter anymore because she couldn't work or contribute or be useful. She paused. Her eyes were distant, seeing something far away. But there was this one nurse at the hospice, Miss Eleanor. She'd come in every night after her shift ended and just sit with my mama, talk to her, brush her hair, hold her hand, not because anyone paid her to, just because mama was scared and lonely and nobody else seemed to notice. Grace looked at William directly. Miss Eleanor taught me something I never forgot. She said, "Grace, the world will tell you that people only matter when they're useful. Don't you believe it? Every human being deserves dignity. Every single one. That's not charity. That's truth." William couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. "So I bring you soup because you're cold and hungry, and because my mama raised me better than to watch someone suffer when I can help. That's all there is to it." She stood up and smoothed her apron. "Take your time with that soup. I'll keep the coffee coming. And don't worry about Ray. He talks tough, but he won't throw you out." "How do you know?" "Because I won't let him." She walked away, and William stared at the soup cooling in front of him, with tears burning in his eyes. He ate slowly. The soup was nothing special. Canned tomatoes, basic seasonings, probably made from a mix, but it was the best thing he'd tasted in years. When he finished, Grace appeared with more coffee and a quiet smile. "Feeling better?" "Yes. Thank you." "Good." She started to clear the dishes. "Wait," William said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. He'd chosen it carefully. Worn. Wrinkled. The kind of money that looks like the last $5 in the world. He pushed it across the table toward her. "For the soup. And the kindness." Grace looked at the bill, then at him, then at the bill again. She picked it up, held it for a moment, felt its weight. Then she reached across the table and pressed it gently back into his palm. "I can't take this. Please, you earned it." "Sir, I watched you count out change for the coffee. I know what this $5 means to you. I can't take it." "Then consider it a gift." Grace shook her head slowly. "My mama used to say that guests don't pay for kindness. You needed soup tonight. That's not a transaction. That's just human beings taking care of each other." William's hand trembled around the bill. "You need this money. I can see that you're struggling." "Everybody's struggling, sir. That's not special. What's special is when we help each other anyway." She smiled, and it transformed her tired face into something luminous. "You keep that $5. Buy yourself breakfast tomorrow. Get something warm." "I don't understand you." "Nothing to understand. I just believe that kindness matters more than money. That's all." She gathered the dishes and walked away. William sat in that booth for another 45 minutes. Ray glared at him from the counter, but didn't say anything. Grace refilled his coffee 3 times, each time with a small smile or a gentle word. When William finally stood to leave, Grace was at the register counting the night's meager tips. $17 and some change, spread out in neat piles of coins and crumpled bills. He paused at the door. "Grace." She looked up. "Thank you for everything. You take care of yourself out there. It's cold tonight." William pushed through the door into the Chicago darkness. The $5 bill was still in his pocket. It felt heavier than all the billions in his bank accounts. Arthur was waiting 3 blocks away. William climbed into the back of the sedan and sat in silence for a long moment. "Well," Arthur asked, "how was it?" "I found her." "Found who?" "My heir." Arthur turned around slowly. "Excuse me." "That woman. Grace Mitchell. She's going to inherit everything." William, she's a waitress. She's more than that. She's the only person in 4 days who treated me like a human being. The only one who gave without expecting anything back. The only one who saw me instead of what I could give her. Your children will fight this. Let them fight. Let them expose themselves completely. Let the world see exactly what they are. This is $4.7 billion, William. And she's the only person I've met who deserves it. Arthur was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I'll need to investigate her. Background. History. Everything. Do it. But I already know what you'll find. What's that? Exactly what she showed me tonight. A good person, a kind heart. Someone who gives when they have nothing because that's simply who they are. The sedan pulled away from the curb and merged into the river of Chicago's midnight traffic. Behind them, Grace Mitchell locked the diner's front door and pulled out her phone. Her neighbor answered on the second ring. Hey, Mrs. Patterson, how's Lily? Sleeping now, but she had 2 bad episodes tonight. Used the inhaler both times. Grace's hand tightened on the phone. Did she ask for me? Every time. I told her you'd be home soon. I'm leaving now, 20 minutes. Take your time, honey. She's resting now. Grace hung up and leaned against the door. Her daughter was 8 years old and had severe asthma. The inhalers cost $380 each. Insurance covered half. Grace worked double shifts 6 days a week to cover the rest. Sometimes it wasn't enough. She looked down at her tips. $17. After Ray took out the cost of the soup, she'd have maybe $12 for a 10-hour shift. But she didn't regret the soup. She didn't regret the coffee refills. She didn't regret giving that old man a moment of dignity in a world that had obviously forgotten he existed. Because her mama had taught her better than that. Grace walked to the bus stop in the cold Chicago night, thinking about Lily, about rent, about the stack of medical bills growing on her kitchen table. She had no idea that her entire life had just changed. 3 days later, Arthur Chen walked into William's penthouse with a file folder 2 inches thick. I found everything, he said. William gestured to the chair across from him. Tell me. Grace Mitchell, 34 years old, single mother. Daughter named Lily, age 8, severe chronic asthma. Grace dropped out of nursing school at 19 to care for her mother who died of ovarian cancer 6 months later. Go on. She's worked at Rosie's Diner for 6 years. Before that, she cleaned offices at night while attending community college during the day. She volunteers at her church's soup kitchen every Sunday and has never missed a shift in 4 years. No criminal record. No debt except medical bills, which total approximately $47,000. William nodded slowly. What else? Arthur hesitated. What is it? There's something else. Something you need to see. He pulled a document from the folder and slid it across the table. William picked it up. It was an employment application for Sterling Industries dated 3 years ago. Grace Mitchell had applied for an administrative position in the Community Relations Department. She applied to work for my company. Yes. And she was rejected. By who? Arthur's face was carefully blank. The rejection letter was signed by Brandon. William felt something cold settle in his stomach. Why? The official reason was not the right cultural fit, but I pulled the full file. Arthur handed him another document. This is the internal memo Brandon wrote to HR. William read it. His hands began to shake. The memo was short, brutal. Brandon had written, reject immediately, single mother, will be unreliable. Also, do we really want these people in our front office? Bad for image. Find someone more appropriate. William read it again and again. These people, he said quietly. Yes. My son rejected her because she's black. Because she's a single mother. Because she's poor. It appears so. William set the memo down carefully, as if it might burn him. Does Grace know why she was rejected? I don't think so. The letter she received just said the position had been filled. William stared at the memo for a long moment. Then he looked up at Arthur with something terrible in his eyes. My son rejected the only decent person who's crossed my path in decades. Rejected her because of the color of her skin and the circumstances of her birth. What do you want to do? William stood up slowly. His body ached. The cancer was eating him alive from the inside. But his mind had never been clearer. I want you to build a fortress, Arthur. I want you to create a will so airtight that my children can never touch it. I want every legal protection, every fail-safe, every contingency. And I want Grace Mitchell to inherit everything I have. They'll fight it. Of course they will. And when they do, this memo goes public. The world will see exactly what Brandon Sterling thinks about these people. The world will see what my children really are. Arthur nodded slowly. It will take time to build something this secure. I don't have time. But you do. Start tonight. And what about Grace? When do we tell her? William walked to the window and looked out at the city he'd helped build. Somewhere out there, Grace Mitchell was probably working another double shift, counting tips, worrying about her daughter's medication. She had no idea. We don't tell her. Not yet. Not until I'm gone. Why? Because if she knew, she'd refuse. That's the kind of person she is. William turned back to Arthur. She gave me back $5 because she thought I needed it more than she did. You think she'd accept $4.7 billion, Bob? Arthur almost smiled. Probably not. Exactly. So we wait. We build the fortress. We let my children believe they've won. And then, when I'm gone, Grace Mitchell will discover that the old man she fed soup to one cold night has given her everything. Arthur gathered his files and stood. There's one more thing you should know. What? Brandon has been asking questions. He knows something is happening. He's hired investigators. William nodded. Let him investigate. Let him scheme. Let him think he's in control. He looked at the memo still lying on his desk. My son is about to learn a lesson about consequences. A lesson I should have taught him 40 years ago. Arthur headed for the door, then paused. William, are you sure about this? All of it? William thought about Grace's eyes when she'd pushed the money back into his hand. The gentle certainty in her voice. The absolute conviction that kindness was not a transaction, but a truth. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Arthur left. William picked up the memo Brandon had written 3 years ago and read it one more time. These people. His hands were shaking. Somewhere across Chicago, his son was probably celebrating, probably counting the billions he thought he was about to inherit, probably sneering at the people he considered beneath him. Brandon had no idea that his own cruelty had just cost him everything. And Grace Mitchell, still counting her tips at Rosie's diner, still worrying about rent and medicine, and whether she'd have enough to feed her daughter breakfast, had no idea that she'd just become the heir to one of the largest fortunes in America. Because 3 years ago she'd applied for a job and been told she wasn't good enough. And 1 week ago she'd given soup to a stranger who was hungry and refused to take his last $5. That stranger was about to give her the world. But what Grace didn't know, what nobody knew except William and Arthur, was that Brandon Sterling had done something far worse than write a racist memo. 3 years ago, when Grace Mitchell walked out of Sterling Industries with that rejection letter in her hand, she hadn't gone straight home. She'd gone to the hospital. Because that morning, her daughter Lily had stopped breathing. 3 years ago, on the same morning, Grace Mitchell had walked into Sterling Industries with hope in her heart, and a freshly printed resume in her hands. Her daughter Lily had woken up unable to breathe. Grace had been in the lobby filling out paperwork when her phone rang. Mrs. Patterson's voice was frantic. Grace, you need to come now. Lily collapsed. She's turning blue. I called 911. Grace dropped the clipboard and ran. She didn't wait for the elevator. She took the stairs all 14 flights, her lungs burning, her heart screaming her daughter's name. By the time she reached the hospital, Lily was in the ICU. A tube down her throat, machines beeping. Her small body looked so fragile against the white sheets that Grace thought she might shatter if anyone touched her. The doctor's words blurred together. Severe asthma attack, respiratory failure. She's stable now, but we need to keep her for observation. Do you have insurance? Grace didn't have insurance. She had a rejection letter that would arrive in the mail 3 days later, signed by a man who thought she wasn't the right cultural fit. The hospital bill was $62,000. Grace had been paying it off ever since. $17 at a time. William Sterling didn't know any of this when he made his decision. He only knew that a woman who had nothing had given him everything, and that his own son had thrown her away like garbage. But Arthur Chen was thorough. Arthur Chen found everything. 2 weeks after the night at the diner, Arthur walked into William's penthouse with a second folder. This one was thicker than the first. "There's more," Arthur said. William looked up from his chair. He'd lost 8 pounds since the diagnosis. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, but his eyes were still sharp. "Tell me." The day Grace was rejected from Sterling Industries, her daughter nearly died. Lily Mitchell, age 5 at the time, suffered a severe asthma attack that caused respiratory failure. She was in the ICU for 6 days. William's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. 6 days. The hospital bill was $62,000. Grace has been making payments of anywhere from $15 to $50 per month, depending on what she can afford. At her current rate, she'll finish paying it off in approximately 47 years. William closed his eyes. My God. There's more. How can there be more? Arthur pulled out another document. While Lily was in the hospital, Grace applied for emergency assistance through the Sterling Foundation's Medical Hardship Program, the program your wife started 30 years ago. William's wife Margaret had died of breast cancer in 1994. The foundation was her legacy, her way of helping families who couldn't afford treatment. What happened to the application? Arthur's face was carefully neutral. It was denied. On what grounds? No grounds were given. But I traced the denial back to its source. Arthur paused. Victoria signed off on it personally. The room went silent. William sat perfectly still for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was barely a whisper. My daughter denied medical assistance to a dying child. My son rejected the child's mother for the color of her skin. And both of them have been circling my deathbed like vultures waiting for their inheritance. Yes. William stood up slowly. His legs were weak, but his resolve was iron. I want to meet her again. Grace. Yes. But not as a homeless man this time. I want to see who she is when she's not giving charity to strangers. I want to see her with her daughter. I want to know that I'm making the right choice. How do you plan to do that without revealing yourself? William thought for a moment. The diner. I'll go back to the diner. As myself this time. Just another customer. And if she recognizes you? She won't. She saw a broken old man in dirty clothes. She'll see a wealthy businessman in a suit. People see what they expect to see. Arthur nodded slowly. When? Tomorrow night. Grace Mitchell worked the Tuesday night shift at Rosie's Diner from 4 p.m. to midnight. By the time William Sterling walked through the door at 7:30, she had already served 43 customers, refilled coffee cups more times than she could count, and broken up an argument between 2 truck drivers who both wanted the last slice of pecan pie. She didn't notice the old man in the expensive suit, who sat down in booth 7. She was too busy taking an order from a family of 5 whose youngest child had just spilled chocolate milk across the entire table. I'm so sorry, the mother said, face red with embarrassment. He's usually not this clumsy. Don't worry about it, Grace said, already mopping up the spill. I've got a daughter his age. I know how it goes. You have kids. 1, Lily. She's 8. Is she here? No, she's with my neighbor. I work nights mostly. The mother's face softened with understanding. That must be hard. Grace shrugged. You do what you have to do. She finished cleaning up the spill, took the family's order, and moved on to the next table. And the next. And the next. William watched her work for 2 hours. He watched how she smiled at every customer, even the rude ones. How she remembered names and orders and small details about people's lives. How she slipped extra fries onto the plate of a teenage boy who looked like he hadn't eaten in days. How she covered the bill of an elderly woman who realized too late that she'd forgotten her wallet at home. "I'll pay you back tomorrow," the woman said, face crumpling with shame. "Don't worry about it, Mrs. Henderson. It's on me." "But I can't let you. You let me help you with your groceries last week. Consider us even." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "You're a good girl, Grace. Your mama would be proud." Grace's smile flickered just for a moment. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. That means a lot." At 9 p.m., Grace finally made it to William's booth. She pulled out her notepad, pen poised, and looked up, and stopped. Something flickered across her face. Recognition. No. Something else. Uncertainty. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "Have we met before?" William's heart hammered in his chest. "I don't think so." "You look familiar somehow. I can't place it." "I have one of those faces." Grace studied him for another moment, then shook her head and smiled. "Sorry, long shift. My brain's playing tricks on me. What can I get you?" "Just coffee, and maybe some of that tomato soup if you have any left." "We always have tomato soup. It's Ray's specialty." "Well, Ray's specialty is opening cans, but you know what I mean." William laughed. It was the first genuine laugh he'd had in weeks. Grace brought the soup and coffee 5 minutes later. As she set them down, William spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "That woman earlier, the one who forgot her wallet, do you always cover bills for people?" Grace's expression shifted slightly. Guarded now. "Sometimes, when I can." "That's very generous of you." "It's not generosity, it's just, Mrs. Henderson's husband died last year. She's on a fixed income. Sometimes she forgets things. It happens when you're grieving." "But you're not exactly wealthy yourself." Grace's eyes narrowed. "How would you know that?" William realized his mistake immediately. "I didn't mean to presume. I just meant, you just meant that a waitress in a diner on the South Side probably doesn't have money to throw around. Is that it?" "I'm sorry. That was rude of me." Grace studied him for a long moment. Then her shoulders relaxed. "No, you're right. I don't have money to throw around. But Mrs. Henderson's husband used to bring her here every Friday night for 40 years. They'd split a piece of pie and hold hands like teenagers. After he died, she still comes every Friday, sits in the same booth, orders the same pie, and sometimes when the grief hits her hard, she forgets things." Grace paused. "I can't bring her husband back, but I can make sure she still gets her pie. That's not generosity, that's just being human." William felt his throat tighten. "You're a remarkable person, Grace." "I'm really not. I'm just trying to get through the day like everybody else." She walked away to serve another table, and William sat with his soup cooling in front of him, thinking about everything Arthur had told him. This woman had been rejected by his son for the color of her skin. Her application for help had been denied by his daughter while her child lay dying. She worked 60 hours a week for tips that barely covered her rent. She was drowning in medical debt that would follow her to the grave. And still, she covered the bill for a grieving widow because it was just being human. William made his decision right then, sitting in that booth with cold soup and bitter coffee. Grace Mitchell wouldn't just inherit his fortune. She would inherit his mission. At 10:30 p.m., Grace's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, and her face went pale. "Ray, I need to take this." "You're in the middle of your shift." "It's about my daughter, please." Ray scowled, but waved her toward the back. Grace pushed through the kitchen door and answered. "Mrs. Patterson." "What's wrong?" "It's Lily. She's having another attack. A bad one. The inhaler isn't working." Grace's blood turned to ice. "Did you call 911? "I'm calling them now. But Grace, she's scared. She's asking for you." "I'm coming. I'm coming right now." Grace hung up and ran back into the dining room. She was halfway to the door when Ray grabbed her arm. "Where do you think you're going?" "My daughter's sick. I have to go." "You leave now, you're fired." Grace stared at him. "What?" "I'm serious, Grace. I've had it with your emergencies. You walk out that door, don't bother coming back." For a moment, Grace didn't move. Her job, her income, her ability to pay rent and buy medicine and keep her daughter alive. Then she thought of Lily, 8 years old, gasping for breath, asking for her mama. "Then I guess I'm fired." She pulled her arm free and ran. William watched her go. Then he stood up, walked to the counter, and looked Ray directly in the eyes. "How much does she make in a shift?" Ray blinked. "What?" "Her wages plus tips." "How much?" "I don't know. 60-70 bucks maybe." "Why?" William pulled out his wallet and placed $500 bills on the counter. "That's for her. For tonight and the rest of the week. And if she comes back looking for her job, you're going to give it to her with a raise." "Understood." Ray's eyes went wide. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who recognizes a good person when he sees one. Something you clearly don't." William walked out of the diner and pulled out his phone. "Arthur, I need you to find out which hospital Grace Mitchell's daughter is being taken to. And I need you to make sure that whatever treatment that child needs, it's covered. Anonymously. Complete coverage. No bills, no questions. That could be tens of thousands of dollars. I don't care if it's hundreds of thousands. Do it. Consider it done." William hung up and stood in the cold Chicago night, watching the ambulance lights flash in the distance. He had 2 months to live, maybe less. But Grace Mitchell's daughter was going to live. He would make sure of that. At Chicago Memorial Hospital, Lily Mitchell was rushed into the emergency room at 11:07 p.m. Her oxygen levels were dangerously low. Her airways had constricted to almost nothing. Grace ran through the hospital doors 3 minutes later, still wearing her diner uniform, her face streaked with tears. "My daughter, Lily Mitchell. She just came in." The nurse at the desk typed quickly. "She's in treatment room 4. The doctor is with her now." Grace ran. She found Lily on a bed, an oxygen mask over her small face, her eyes wide with fear. When she saw her mother, she reached out her arms. "Mama!" Grace grabbed her hand and held tight. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. You're going to be okay." "I couldn't breathe, Mama. I tried, but I couldn't." "I know, sweetheart. But the doctors are helping you now. Just keep breathing, nice and slow." The doctor, a young woman with kind eyes, pulled Grace aside. "Ms. Mitchell, your daughter's asthma is severe. We've stabilized her for now, but she needs a specialist. She needs better medication. What she's been using isn't strong enough." "I know. I've been trying to get her better treatment, but—" "The costs. I understand." The doctor hesitated. "There's a new treatment protocol that could help her significantly. It's expensive, but it's very effective." "How expensive?" "The initial treatment is about $12,000. Monthly maintenance would be around $800. Grace felt the world tilt beneath her feet. $12,000. She didn't have $1,200. I'll figure something out." "Ms. Mitchell." The doctor's voice was gentle. "I don't want to give you false hope, but something unusual happened tonight. An anonymous donor contacted the hospital about 20 minutes ago. They've agreed to cover all of Lily's treatment costs, everything, for as long as she needs it." Grace stared at her. "What?" "I don't know who they are. The hospital administrator said it came through a lawyer's office. But whoever they are, they're paying for everything. Your daughter is going to get the treatment she needs." Grace's legs gave out. She grabbed the wall to keep from falling. "That's not possible. That doesn't happen. Things like that don't happen to people like me." "It's happening. I confirmed it myself." The doctor smiled. Someone out there is looking out for you, Ms. Mitchell. I don't know who, but they are. Grace walked back to Lily's bedside in a daze. Her daughter was breathing easier now, the color returning to her cheeks. Mama, why are you crying? Grace wiped her face. Happy tears, baby. Just happy tears. Did something good happen? Grace thought about the anonymous donor, the impossible gift, the stranger who had decided for reasons she couldn't understand that her daughter's life was worth saving. Yeah, baby. Something good happened. She sat down next to Lily's bed and held her hand through the night. 3 blocks away, in a black sedan parked outside the hospital, William Sterling sat in the darkness and watched the lights in the windows. It's done, Arthur said. The hospital has confirmed the payment arrangement. Good. William, if I may ask, why, you don't know this woman, not really. William was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. 30 years ago, when Margaret was dying, I would have given everything I had to save her. Every dollar, every building, every share of stock. None of it mattered compared to her life. He paused. I couldn't save Margaret. But I can save Grace's daughter. And maybe in some small way that balances the scales. Arthur nodded slowly. Your children won't understand. They'll say you're wasting money on strangers. My children have never understood anything that doesn't directly benefit them. That's the problem, Arthur. That's always been the problem. William looked up at the hospital windows. I have 2 months left, maybe less. And I've finally figured out what I want to do with whatever time I have remaining. What's that? I want to make sure that when I'm gone, the world is a little better than I found it. I want to make sure that kindness wins just this once, and I want to make sure that my children learn that money isn't everything. He turned to Arthur. Let's go home. We have a will to finalize. The next morning, Brandon Sterling stormed into his father's penthouse without knocking. We need to talk. William looked up from his breakfast. He'd barely touched it. His appetite was almost gone now. Good morning to you too, Brandon. Don't play games with me. I know what you've been doing. Do you? The disguises. The late-night trips to the South Side. The secret meetings with Arthur. Did you think I wouldn't find out? William set down his fork. I assumed you would. You've always been thorough when it comes to protecting your interests. My interests. This is about the family. This is about everything you've built. Is it? Or is it about what you think you're entitled to? Brandon's face reddened. I'm your son. Yes, you are. And that fact has disappointed me more than you will ever know. The words hit Brandon like a slap. He took a step back. What is that supposed to mean? William stood up slowly. His body was weaker, but his voice was strong. It means that I've spent 45 years watching you become someone I don't recognize. Someone cold, someone cruel, someone who looks at people and sees only what they can give you. That's not... 3 years ago, a woman named Grace Mitchell applied for a job at Sterling Industries. Do you remember her? Brandon's face went blank. I interview hundreds of applicants. I can't remember them all. You didn't interview her. You rejected her application before she even got through the door. Do you remember why? I don't know what you're talking about. William walked to his desk, picked up a piece of paper and handed it to his son. Brandon read it. His face went pale. Where did you get this? Arthur found it, along with a lot of other things I wish I'd never learned. This is out of context. I was trying to protect the company's image. By calling her these people. By rejecting her because she's black and a single mother. You don't understand the pressures I'm under. The board has expectations. The shareholders. The board answers to me. The shareholders answer to me. And none of them ever asked you to be a racist. Brandon crumpled the memo in his fist. Fine, I made a mistake. I'll apologize. I'll make it right. It's too late for that. What do you mean? William looked at his son with something that might have been pity. The day you rejected Grace Mitchell, her daughter was in the hospital dying. The family applied to the Sterling Foundation for emergency medical assistance. Your sister denied it personally. Brandon's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Victoria, she wouldn't. She did. I have the documentation. There must be an explanation. Victoria was probably just following protocol. There is no protocol for denying help to a dying child, Brandon. There's only cruelty. Brandon was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Harder now, colder. Why are you telling me this? What do you want? I want you to understand why I've made the decisions I've made. What decisions? William walked back to his chair and sat down heavily. I'm dying, Brandon. You know that. What you don't know is how I've chosen to handle my affairs when I'm gone. The will. You've changed the will. Yes. To what? What have you done? William looked at his son, his firstborn, the child he'd held in his arms 45 years ago and promised to give the world. I've given the world to someone who deserves it. Brandon's face twisted. Who? You'll find out soon enough. Tell me now. No. Brandon slammed his hand on the desk. I have a right to know I'm your son. I've worked for this company my entire life. You've worked for yourself, Brandon. Never for the company. Never for the family. Only for yourself. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked how I was feeling? When was the last time you visited without an agenda? When was the last time you did something kind for someone who couldn't pay you back? Brandon had no answer. William nodded slowly. That's what I thought. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Now get out of my house. Brandon stared at his father for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him so hard the paintings rattled on the walls. William sat alone in the silence, breathing slowly, feeling the cancer eating away at him from the inside. He picked up his phone and called Arthur. Brandon knows something is happening. He'll try to stop it. I anticipated that. The will is already filed with 3 separate law firms in 3 different states. Even if he challenges it in one jurisdiction, the others will hold. Good. There's something else you should know. What? Grace Mitchell went back to the diner this morning. Ray gave her job back, with a raise. William smiled. It hurt his face. He hadn't smiled in so long. She went back. She needs the money. Even with Lily's medical costs covered, she still has rent and food and everything else. She didn't ask any questions about the raise, just thanked Ray and started her shift. Of course she did. That's who she is. William hung up and looked out the window at the city below. 2 months, maybe less. But Grace Mitchell was going to be okay. Her daughter was going to be okay. And when William was gone, Brandon and Victoria would learn that kindness had a value that couldn't be measured in dollars. They would learn it the hard way. The way they'd taught Grace Mitchell 3 years ago. The way they were about to be taught themselves. 6 weeks before William Sterling died, Brandon called an emergency meeting with his sister. Victoria arrived at his penthouse at 11 p.m., still wearing her evening gown from a charity gala. Her face was tight with anger. This better be important. I had to leave in the middle of my speech. It's important. Brandon handed her a glass of whiskey. Father is planning something big. I know. He's been acting strange for weeks. The disguises, the secret trips, the meetings with Arthur at all hours. It's worse than we thought. Brandon sat down heavily. I confronted him yesterday. He admitted he's changed the will. Victoria's hand froze with the glass halfway to her lips. Changed it how? He wouldn't say. But he made it clear that we're not getting what we expected. That's impossible. We're his children, his only children. Who else would he leave it to? I don't know, but I intend to find out. Victoria set down her glass. What do you want to do? First, we need to find out exactly what he's planning. I've already hired investigators. They're looking into everyone father has contacted in the past 2 months. And if we find something, Brandon's eyes were cold. Then we stop it. Whatever it takes. How if the will is already changed? There are ways. If we can prove he wasn't mentally competent when he made the changes, the entire document becomes invalid. Victoria understood immediately. A competency challenge. Exactly. We get doctors to testify that the cancer affected his judgment. We present evidence of his erratic behavior. The disguises, the wandering around homeless shelters, the secret meetings. It all paints a picture of a man who lost touch with reality. And if that doesn't work, Brandon smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Then we find out who he's planning to give our money to, and we make sure that person is in no position to accept it. Victoria picked up her glass and drained it in one swallow. I'm listening. 3 days later, Brandon's investigators delivered their first report. Her name is Grace Mitchell, the lead investigator said. He was a former FBI agent named Thomas Hartley, and he had no moral qualms about the work he did. 34 years old, single mother, works as a waitress at a diner on the South Side. Brandon stared at the photograph in front of him. A black woman in a faded uniform smiling at someone off camera. This is who my father wants to give his fortune to a waitress? It appears so. Your father visited her diner multiple times over the past several weeks. Our sources indicate he's been making anonymous payments on her behalf. Medical bills, rent, things like that. How much? At least $50,000 so far, maybe more. Victoria grabbed the photograph. She's nobody. She's literally nobody. How did she even meet our father? We're still piecing that together. But from what we can tell, your father encountered her while he was doing his homeless disguise routine. She apparently showed him some kindness, and he became fixated. Brandon stood up and walked to the window. His hands were shaking with rage. Our father is giving away our inheritance because some waitress gave him a bowl of soup. It appears that way, yes. Victoria's voice was ice. What do we know about her? Any weaknesses? Any secrets? She's clean, no criminal record, no scandals. She dropped out of nursing school to care for her dying mother, raised her daughter alone after her husband left, works 60 hours a week to pay her bills. By all accounts, she's exactly what she appears to be. Everyone has secrets, Brandon said without turning around. Everyone has something they're hiding. Find it. Mr. Sterling, I've been doing this for 20 years. Some people really are just good. This woman appears to be one of them. Brandon finally turned. Then make something up. Hartley's expression didn't change. Excuse me. You heard me. If she doesn't have skeletons in her closet, put some there. I don't care what it takes. I want that woman destroyed. Brandon. Victoria's voice held a warning. Be careful. I'm done being careful. Our father has lost his mind, and he's about to hand everything we've worked for to a complete stranger. I won't let that happen. Hartley stood slowly. Mr. Sterling, I investigate. I don't fabricate. If you want that kind of work done, you'll need to find someone else. He walked out without another word. Brandon picked up the photograph of Grace Mitchell and tore it in half. Find someone else, he said to Victoria. Find someone who doesn't have morals. 4 weeks before William died, Grace Mitchell noticed something strange. She was walking Lily to school when she saw a car parked across the street from their apartment building. A black sedan with tinted windows. It had been there yesterday, too, and the day before. Mama, why are you walking so fast? Grace forced herself to slow down. Sorry, baby, just trying to stay warm. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. That night, after her shift at the diner, Grace called Mrs. Patterson. Have you noticed anything unusual lately? Any strangers hanging around the building? Now that you mention it, there was a man asking questions about you yesterday. Said he was from the electric company, but he didn't have a uniform. Grace's stomach dropped. What kind of questions? He wanted to know how long you'd lived here, whether you had any visitors, what time you usually came home. I told him it was none of his business. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. If anyone else comes asking, don't tell them anything. Grace, honey, are you in some kind of trouble? I don't know. I hope not. She hung up and sat in the dark, listening to Lily breathe in the next room. Something was wrong. She could feel it. But she had no idea how wrong things were about to get. 2 weeks later, Grace was called into Ray's office at the diner. Sit down, Ray said. His face was grim. Grace sat. What's going on? I got a visit today. From some people asking questions about you. What kind of people? Lawyers, investigators. I don't know exactly. But they were asking about your work history, your character, whether you'd ever stolen from the register. Grace felt her blood run cold. Stolen? I've never stolen anything in my life. I know that. I told them that. But Grace, these weren't ordinary people. They had money, power, the kind of people who can make problems for a little diner like this. What did they want? Ray hesitated. They wanted me to say things about you. Bad things. They offered me money. How much? $10,000. Grace couldn't breathe. To lie about me. To say you'd been skimming from the register, that you'd been unreliable, that you'd done other things. What other things? Ray couldn't meet her eyes. They wanted me to say you'd been entertaining men, in the back, for money. Grace stood up so fast her chair fell over. That's a lie. That's a disgusting lie. I know it's a lie. That's why I said no. Who are these people? Why are they doing this to me? I don't know. But Grace, whatever's going on, it's bigger than a diner on the South Side. These people want to destroy you, and they have the resources to do it. Grace walked out of Ray's office in a daze. Her hands were shaking. Her mind was racing. Who would want to destroy her? She was nobody. She had nothing. She'd never done anything to anyone. She thought about the black sedan, the man asking questions, the investigators offering Ray money to lie. Someone was coming for her, and she had no idea why. That night, William Sterling collapsed in his penthouse. Arthur found him on the floor of his study, unconscious, his breathing shallow. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. By the time they reached the hospital, William had regained consciousness, but only barely. How long? He asked Dr. Harrison. The doctor's face told him everything. Days, William. Maybe 2 weeks if we're lucky. The cancer has spread to your liver. Your kidneys are failing. William nodded slowly. I need to make a phone call. You need to rest. I'll rest when I'm dead. Right now I need to make a phone call. Dr. Harrison handed him his phone and stepped out of the room. William dialed Arthur's number. It's happening faster than we thought. I have days, maybe 2 weeks. Arthur's voice was steady. What do you need me to do? Brandon and Victoria are making their move. I've heard rumors. They're trying to discredit Grace before I'm even gone. I know. I've been monitoring their activities. They've hired investigators. They're spreading lies. They offered her employer money to fabricate evidence against her. We have to protect her. How she doesn't even know she's being targeted. She doesn't know about the inheritance. William was quiet for a moment. Then maybe it's time she did. William, if you tell her now, she'll refuse. You said so yourself. I won't tell her about the money. But I'll tell her about the danger. She deserves to know that my children are trying to destroy her life. And how do you explain that without explaining everything? I'll find a way. William hung up and lay back against the hospital pillows. He had days, maybe 2 weeks. And somewhere across the city, Grace Mitchell was being hunted by people who saw her as an obstacle to their inheritance. He had to warn her, even if it meant revealing himself, even if it meant she would hate him for what he'd brought into her life. The next morning, Grace arrived at her apartment to find an envelope slipped under her door. She picked it up carefully. No return address. Her name written in elegant handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Grace, you don't know me, but I know you. People are coming for you. Powerful people with unlimited resources and no conscience. They want to destroy you because of something I've done. This is not your fault. But you need to protect yourself. Don't trust anyone who asks questions about your past. Don't believe the lies they will spread. And if things get bad, call this number. Someone will help you. Below the message was a phone number. At the bottom of the page, a single line. I'm sorry for bringing this into your life. I never meant for you to be hurt. No signature. Grace read the letter 3 times. Her hands were trembling. She thought about the black sedan, the investigators, Ray's offer. Someone was trying to destroy her, and someone else was trying to protect her. But who? And why? She folded the letter carefully and put it in her pocket. She didn't call the number. Not yet. But she kept it close, just in case. 3 days later, the first lie hit. Grace was at work when Mrs. Patterson called, frantic. Grace, you need to come home. There are people here, reporters. They're taking pictures of the building. They're asking the neighbors about you. What? Why? I don't know, but they're saying terrible things. They're saying you're involved with some rich man, that you seduced him to get his money. Grace dropped the phone. She ran out of the diner without even taking off her apron. When she got to her building, there were cameras everywhere. Reporters shouting questions. Neighbors watching from their windows. Ms. Mitchell, is it true you're in a relationship with William Sterling? Did you target him because of his illness? How long have you been planning this? Grace pushed through the crowd, covering her face. I don't know what you're talking about. Leave me alone. Our sources say you've been receiving payments from Sterling Industries. Care to comment? Have you ever met Brandon Sterling? Victoria Sterling? Grace made it to her door and slammed it behind her. She stood in the darkness, breathing hard, trying to understand what was happening. William Sterling. She knew that name. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. But she'd never met him. Never even seen him. Had she? The homeless man. The one she'd given soup to 6 weeks ago. The one who'd tried to give her $5. His eyes. Something about his eyes had seemed familiar. Grace sank to the floor. It couldn't be. It was impossible. But somehow, deep in her gut, she knew. The old man she'd fed soup to on a cold night was William Sterling. And now his family was trying to destroy her for it. Lily came out of her room, scared by the noise outside. Mama, what's happening? Grace pulled her daughter close. I don't know, baby, but it's going to be okay. I promise. She didn't know if that was true, but she would die before she let anyone hurt her daughter. That night, Grace Mitchell made a decision. She pulled out the letter she'd received and dialed the number at the bottom. A man answered on the second ring. Ms. Mitchell, I was hoping you'd call. Who are you? What's going on? My name is Arthur Chen. I'm an attorney, and I represent William Sterling. The homeless man, the one I gave soup to. That was him, wasn't it? A pause. Yes, it was. Why? Why would a billionaire pretend to be homeless? Because he wanted to know if kindness still existed in the world. He'd been testing people for weeks. Hotels, restaurants, even his own building. Everyone turned him away. Everyone except you. Grace closed her eyes. I just gave him soup. You gave him his humanity back. And now he wants to give you something in return. I don't want anything. I didn't do it for money. I know. That's exactly why he chose you. Chose me for what? Arthur was quiet for a long moment. Ms. Mitchell, William Sterling is dying. He has days left, maybe a week. And when he's gone, his children will do everything in their power to destroy you. What you've seen so far is just the beginning. But I haven't done anything wrong. That doesn't matter to them. They see you as a threat, and they will stop at nothing to eliminate that threat. Grace's voice shook. What am I supposed to do? First, you need to protect yourself and your daughter. I've arranged for security. They'll be outside your building within the hour. I can't afford security. You don't need to afford it. It's already paid for. By who? By the man whose life you saved with a bowl of soup. Grace felt tears streaming down her face. I don't understand any of this. You will. Soon. But right now, the most important thing is keeping you safe. Can you do that? Can you stay inside, stay quiet, and let me handle the Sterling children? My daughter, they can't come after my daughter. They won't, I give you my word. Your word doesn't mean much to me, Mr. Chen. I don't know you. Then trust the man who sent me. William Sterling has spent his entire life building an empire. In his final days, he's chosen to spend his last resources protecting you. That should tell you something about who he is, and who you are to him. Grace wiped her eyes. When can I see him? When can I thank him? Arthur's voice softened. Soon. I hope soon. He didn't tell her that William had slipped into a coma that morning. He didn't tell her that the doctors weren't sure he would wake up. Some truths were too heavy to carry all at once. William Sterling opened his eyes on the 7th day. Arthur was beside his bed looking 10 years older than he had a week ago. What happened? William's voice was a whisper. You've been unconscious for 7 days. The doctors didn't think you'd wake up. Grace, is she safe? She's safe. I've had security on her around the clock. Brandon's smear campaign is failing. The press is starting to question his sources. Good. William tried to sit up and failed. I need to see her. William, you can barely speak. You can't. I need to see her, before it's too late. Please, Arthur. This is the last thing I'll ever ask of you. Arthur looked at his oldest friend, the man he'd served for 31 years, the man who had hours left, maybe less. I'll bring her tonight. William closed his eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just stay alive long enough to say what you need to say. At 8 p.m. that night, Grace Mitchell walked into William Sterling's hospital room for the first time. She barely recognized him. The man in the bed was skeletal, his skin gray, his breathing labored. Nothing like the tired but dignified homeless man she'd served soup to just weeks ago. But his eyes were the same. Grace. His voice was barely audible. Thank you for coming. Grace sat down beside his bed. Tears were already streaming down her face. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Would it have mattered? She thought about it. No, I would have given you soup anyway. William smiled. It was barely a movement of his lips. I know. That's why I chose you. Arthur told me about the will, about your children, about everything. Are you angry? I don't know what I am. Confused, scared, overwhelmed. You should be all of those things. I've brought chaos into your life. I'm sorry for that. I don't want your money, Mr. Sterling. I never wanted anything from you. I know. That's exactly why you're going to get it. Grace shook her head. Your children should have it. It's their birthright. William's eyes hardened just for a moment. Birthright. That's a word for people who think they deserve things they didn't earn. He coughed, and for a moment, Grace thought he was dying right there in front of her. But he caught his breath and continued. My son rejected you because of your skin color. My daughter denied your dying child medical care. They've spent the past month trying to destroy your reputation with lies and fabricated evidence. Does that sound like people who deserve a birthright? Grace had no answer. I've made my decision, Grace. When I'm gone, everything I have goes to you. The company, the properties, the investments, all of it. That's billions of dollars. Yes. I don't know how to handle billions of dollars. You'll learn. Arthur will help you. And you'll have something my children never had. What's that? A conscience. Grace sat in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke. Your daughter, Victoria. She denied my application for help when Lily was dying. Yes. And your son wrote a memo calling me these people. Yes. Grace felt something cold settle in her chest. I applied to your foundation because I had nowhere else to turn. Lily was in the ICU. The bills were piling up. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would help us. I'm sorry. Your daughter looked at my application and decided my daughter wasn't worth saving. I know. And now you want me to take everything from them. William reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. I don't want you to take anything from them. I want you to receive what they never deserved. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. My children were given everything. They've never worked for anything. They've never sacrificed for anything. And they've never helped anyone but themselves. You've worked your entire life. You've sacrificed everything for your daughter. And you've helped strangers who couldn't give you anything in return. He squeezed her hand. The world rewards the wrong people, Grace. The cruel, the selfish, the greedy. They rise to the top and stay there because they're willing to do things that good people won't do. Then how did you get to the top? William was quiet for a moment. I wasn't always good. I did things I'm not proud of. Made choices that hurt people. I told myself it was necessary. That business required hard decisions. What changed? You did. That night at the diner, you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That kindness doesn't cost anything. That dignity isn't something you earn. That the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they give. Grace felt tears falling again. I just gave you soup. You gave me hope. On the worst night of my life, when I thought humanity was dead, you proved me wrong. And that's worth more than all the money in the world. William's eyes were closing. His strength was fading. Promise me something, Grace. What? When you have the money, when you have the power, don't become what they are. Don't let it change you. Stay the woman who gives soup to strangers and refuses their last $5. I promise. And take care of Lily. Give her the life she deserves. I will. William smiled one last time. Good. That's good. His hand went limp in hers. For a moment, Grace thought he was gone, but his chest was still rising and falling, slowly, weakly, but still moving. Arthur stepped forward. He needs to rest. The reading of the will is scheduled for 3 days from now. Whatever happens, be ready. Ready for what? War. Grace looked at the dying man in the bed, the stranger who had changed her life with a bowl of soup. I'll be ready, she said. She didn't know if that was true, but she would learn. William Sterling died at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Arthur Chen was beside him when it happened. The monitors flatlined. The nurses rushed in, but there was nothing anyone could do. The billionaire who had built an empire from nothing took his last breath in a hospital bed alone except for his attorney and the memory of a woman who had given him soup when no one else would. Arthur made 3 phone calls. The first was to Grace Mitchell. He's gone, Arthur said. Grace was silent for a long moment. Did he suffer? No, he went peacefully. He was dreaming about something. His lips were curved in a smile at the end. Thank you for telling me. The will reading is tomorrow at 2 p.m., Sterling Tower, 47th floor. I need you to be there. I don't know if I can do this. You can. You have to. William believed in you. Now it's time to prove he was right. The second call was to Brandon Sterling. Brandon answered on the first ring. Is it done? Arthur felt disgust rise in his throat. Is it done? As if his father's death was a business transaction. Your father passed away 20 minutes ago. I see. Brandon's voice was flat. When is the reading? Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the conference room. I'll be there. Brandon hung up without another word. The third call was to Victoria. She answered with fake tears already in her voice. Arthur, please tell me it's not true. It's true. Your father is gone. Oh God. Oh God. The sobbing was theatrical practiced. I can't believe it. I just saw him last week. You saw him to demand your inheritance, Arthur thought. But he said nothing. The reading is tomorrow at 2 p.m. So soon? Don't we need time to grieve? Your father wanted it done quickly. Those were his instructions. Victoria's crying stopped abruptly. Fine. I'll be there. And Arthur? Yes. Whatever games my father was playing, they end tomorrow. Brandon and I are his only children. We're his only heirs. Nothing else matters. She hung up. Arthur sat alone in the hospital room for a long time, looking at the body of the man who had been his friend for 31 years. "Don't worry, William," he said quietly. "I'll make sure they get exactly what they deserve." The morning of the will reading. Grace Mitchell woke up at 5 a.m. She hadn't slept. How could she? In a few hours, her entire life would change. Or it would stay exactly the same, depending on how hard Brandon and Victoria fought. Lily was still asleep. Grace watched her breathe for a while, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. A bowl of soup, a $5 bill, a dying man's final wish. Her phone buzzed. A text from Arthur. "Car will pick you up at 1 p.m. Wear something professional. And Grace, no matter what happens in that room, don't let them see you afraid." Grace looked at her closet. She had one professional outfit. A black dress she'd worn to her mother's funeral 7 years ago. It still fit barely. She put it on and looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't look like a billionaire. She looked like a waitress, pretending to be something she wasn't. But William Sterling had seen something in her that she couldn't see in herself. And today, she would have to find it. At 1:45 p.m., Grace walked into Sterling Tower for the second time in her life. The first time 3 years ago, she'd been a desperate single mother applying for a job. She'd been turned away by a man who thought she wasn't good enough. Today, that same man was waiting for her on the 47th floor. Arthur met her in the lobby. "Are you ready?" "No." "Good. That means you're taking this seriously." They rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened, Grace saw Brandon and Victoria Sterling for the first time. Brandon was tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Grace made in a year. His eyes swept over her with open contempt. "This is her," he said to Arthur. "This is the woman my father lost his mind over." "Your father didn't lose his mind, Mr. Sterling. His mind was the sharpest it had ever been." Victoria stepped forward. She was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect hatred in her eyes. "You should leave," Victoria said to Grace. "This is a family matter. You don't belong here." Grace felt her knees shake, but she remembered Arthur's words. "Don't let them see you afraid." "Your father invited me. I'm not leaving." Victoria laughed. "Invited you? Daddy was dying. He wasn't thinking clearly. Whatever he promised you, it's not going to happen." "That's enough." Arthur's voice cut through the tension. "The reading will begin in 10 minutes. I suggest everyone take their seats." The conference room was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. A long mahogany table dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs. Grace sat on one side. Brandon and Victoria sat on the other. Their lawyers filled the remaining seats, 6 of them all in expensive suits, all looking at Grace like she was dirt on their shoes. Arthur stood at the head of the table. "Before we begin, I want to make something clear. William Sterling spent the last 3 months of his life preparing this document. He was examined by 3 independent psychiatrists, all of whom certified that he was mentally competent. He recorded 37 video testimonies affirming his wishes. Any challenge to this will on grounds of mental incapacity will fail." Brandon's jaw tightened. "Just read the will, Arthur." "Very well." Arthur opened the folder in front of him. "I, William James Sterling, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The room was silent. "To my son Brandon William Sterling, I leave the following my collection of watches purchased over 40 years of business travel in the hope that he learns to value time as something other than money. I also leave him my journals from 1962 to 1975, documenting the early years of building Sterling Industries, in the hope that he remembers what it means to create something from nothing. I leave him no cash, no stock, no property, and no authority within Sterling Industries. Brandon exploded out of his chair. What? Mr. Sterling, please sit down. This is insane. This is fraud. He wouldn't. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, or I will have security remove you. Brandon sat, his face purple with rage. Arthur continued. To my daughter, Victoria Elizabeth Sterling, I leave the following: the portrait of her mother that hangs in the Aspen House, painted in 1978, when Margaret still believed that kindness was strength. I leave her my mother's recipe book, unused for 60 years, in the hope that she learns to nourish others instead of only herself. I leave her no cash, no stock, no property, and no authority within Sterling Industries. Victoria's hands were shaking. Arthur, this can't be right. Check again. I've checked it 100 times, Ms. Sterling. This is your father's will. Then he was insane. He was out of his mind. We'll contest this. Ms. Sterling. Arthur's voice was ice. I haven't finished reading. Victoria fell silent. Arthur turned to the next page. The remainder of my estate, including all shares of Sterling Industries, all real property, domestic and international, all investment accounts, all business holdings, and all liquid assets, totaling approximately $4.7 billion, I leave to Grace Elizabeth Mitchell of Chicago, Illinois. The room exploded. Brandon was screaming. Victoria was crying. The lawyers were shouting over each other. Security guards rushed in, not sure who to restrain. Through it all, Grace sat perfectly still. $4.7 billion. She couldn't even comprehend that number. Arthur raised his hand for silence. When that didn't work, he slammed his palm on the table so hard the glasses rattled. There's more. Everyone stopped. Arthur pulled out another document. Your father anticipated this reaction. He left a message for both of you. I'm required to read it in full. Brandon's chest was heaving. Read it then. Read what that demented old man had to say. Arthur cleared his throat. To Brandon and Victoria. If you're hearing this, then I'm dead and you're angry. Good. You should be. You've spent your entire lives expecting to inherit what I built, and now you're discovering that expectations and entitlements are not the same thing. Arthur paused. You may be wondering why I chose Grace Mitchell over my own children. The answer is simple. 3 years ago, Grace Mitchell applied for a job at Sterling Industries. Brandon, you rejected her application without even interviewing her. Your memo called her these people and questioned whether we wanted her kind in our front office. I have that memo, Brandon. So does the press if you choose to challenge this will. Brandon went pale. On the same day Grace was rejected, her daughter Lily was in the hospital with respiratory failure. Grace applied to the Sterling Foundation for emergency medical assistance. Victoria, you personally denied that application. You sentenced a 5-year-old child to die because her mother was black and poor. I have that documentation too. Victoria started crying. Real tears this time. You are not my heirs because you have proven repeatedly and consistently that you lack the basic human decency required to steward what I've built. Grace Mitchell has more integrity in her little finger than both of you have in your entire bodies. She gave soup to a homeless man when no one was watching. She refused his money because she thought he needed it more. She has spent her entire life giving to others while receiving nothing in return. Arthur's voice cracked slightly as he continued. Brandon, Victoria. I loved you once. I loved you when you were children before the money twisted you into something I don't recognize. But love does not mean blindness, and inheritance is not a birthright. It's a trust, a responsibility. And I trust Grace Mitchell to do what neither of you ever could: use this fortune to make the world better instead of worse. Arthur set down the letter. There's one final provision. Brandon's head snapped up. What? Your father included a clause regarding legal challenges. If either of you contests this will in any court for any reason, certain documents will be released to the press immediately. Brandon, that includes your memo, your expense reports from the past 10 years, and evidence of embezzlement totaling approximately $4.2 million from the Chicago Development Fund. Brandon's face went gray. Victoria, the documents include your denial of the Mitchell application, your false expense claims against the foundation, and evidence of insider trading related to 3 separate acquisitions between 2019 and 2023. Victoria stopped breathing. Your father also recorded video testimony describing both of your conduct in detail. If you challenge, those videos go public within 24 hours. The room was silent. Brandon spoke first, his voice barely a whisper. He wouldn't. He wouldn't destroy his own children. Arthur looked at him with something like pity. You destroyed yourselves, Mr. Sterling. Your father simply documented it. Victoria stood up suddenly, knocking her chair backward. This isn't over. I don't care what evidence he has. I'll fight this until my last breath. That's your choice, Ms. Sterling, but understand what you're choosing. Public humiliation, criminal prosecution, the complete destruction of the Sterling name that you claim to care so much about. Victoria's face twisted. And what about her? She pointed at Grace. What about the woman who seduced my dying father? Grace stood up for the first time. I didn't seduce anyone. I gave your father a bowl of soup because he was hungry. I tried to give back his $5 because I thought he needed it more than I did. That's all I did. That's everything I did. You expect us to believe that? I don't care what you believe, but I'm going to tell you something that your father never got to say. Grace walked around the table until she was standing directly in front of Victoria. 3 years ago, I sat in this building filling out a job application while my daughter was dying. I didn't know she was dying. I found out when my phone rang and my neighbor told me Lily wasn't breathing. I ran down 14 flights of stairs because I couldn't wait for the elevator. I got to the hospital just in time to see my baby hooked up to machines fighting for her life. Victoria tried to step back. Grace followed. The bills were $62,000. I've been paying them off ever since. $17 at a time. $23 at a time. Whatever I can scrape together after rent and food and medicine. That's not my problem. No, it wasn't. But you made it your problem when you denied my application to the foundation. When you looked at a request to help a dying child and decided she wasn't worth saving. I was following protocol. There is no protocol for letting children die, Ms. Sterling. There's only cruelty. Grace turned to face Brandon. And you. You rejected me because I'm black, because I'm a single mother, because I'm poor. You wrote a memo calling me these people, as if I were something less than human. Brandon couldn't meet her eyes. But here's what neither of you understand. Your father didn't give me this money because I'm good and you're bad. He gave it to me because I proved something that neither of you ever could. What's that? Brandon spat. That kindness matters. That treating people with dignity matters. That the way you act when no one is watching is who you really are. Grace walked back to her seat and sat down. I didn't ask for this fortune. I don't know if I want it. But I promise you both something. If I take this money, I will use every single dollar to do what your father wished you had done. I will help people. I will build things that matter. And I will never ever forget where I came from. The room was silent. Arthur gathered his papers. This concludes the reading of the will. Ms. Mitchell, there's a substantial amount of paperwork we'll need to complete over the coming weeks. I suggest we schedule a meeting for tomorrow morning. Grace nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Brandon stood up and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned. This isn't over, he said. You think you've won, but you're wrong. We have resources. We have connections. We have power that you can't even imagine, and we will use every bit of it to destroy you. Grace looked at him steadily. Your father warned me you'd say that. My father was a fool. Your father was the only person in your family with a conscience, and it broke his heart that neither of you inherited it. Brandon's face contorted with rage. For a moment, Grace thought he might actually attack her. but Victoria grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the door. "Not here," Victoria hissed. "Not now." They left without another word. Grace sat alone in the conference room for a long time after everyone else had gone. The Chicago skyline stretched out before her, millions of lights, twinkling in the gathering darkness. $4.7 billion. She was now one of the richest women in America, and she had never felt more terrified in her entire life. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson. "Lily wants to know when you're coming home. She says she made you a picture." Grace smiled through her tears. Home. Her tiny apartment with the leaky ceiling and the thin walls. Her daughter waiting with a crayon drawing. Her life simple and hard and real. That was still who she was. No amount of money would change that. She typed back, "Tell her I'll be there in an hour, and tell her I love her." Then she stood up, smoothed her funeral dress, and walked out of Sterling Tower. The war was just beginning, but Grace Mitchell had survived worse, and she had something Brandon and Victoria would never understand. She had nothing to lose. 2 days after the will reading, the first lawsuit was filed. Brandon and Victoria, ignoring their father's warnings, had hired a team of lawyers to challenge the will on grounds of undue influence. Their argument was simple. Grace Mitchell had manipulated a dying man into changing his will in her favor. Arthur called Grace with the news. "They filed this morning. The hearing is in 3 weeks. I thought they were afraid of the evidence being released. They've calculated that the damage from losing the inheritance is greater than the damage from public exposure. They're betting that their lawyers can suppress the documents before they become public record. Can they? They can try. But I've already sent copies to 3 separate news organizations with instructions to publish if anything happens to me or if the documents are suppressed by legal order." Grace was quiet for a moment. "Arthur, I need to ask you something." "Anything." "Why are you doing this? You worked for William Sterling for 30 years. Brandon and Victoria will destroy your career for helping me." Arthur laughed softly. "Grace, I'm 73 years old. I have more money than I'll ever spend and no family to leave it to. My career is already over. I'm doing this because William asked me to, and because it's the right thing to do." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. The next few months are going to be brutal. Brandon and Victoria will use every weapon they have. They'll attack your character, your past, your parenting. They'll dig up every mistake you've ever made and parade it in front of the press. I haven't made that many mistakes. They don't need real mistakes. They just need doubt. If they can convince a judge that you might have manipulated William, that's enough to delay the inheritance for years, maybe decades." Grace thought about Lily, about the medical bills, about the life she'd been barely holding together for years. "I don't have decades, Arthur." "I know. That's why we're going to fight." The next 3 weeks were a nightmare. Reporters camped outside Grace's apartment building. Photographers followed her to work, to the grocery store, to Lily's school. Every moment of her life became public property. The tabloids were brutal. Waitress seduces dying billionaire. Gold digger steals sterling fortune. The soup that cost $4.7 billion. Grace stopped reading them after the first week, but Lily couldn't avoid them. The other kids at school had parents who talked, and children can be cruel. "Mama, why are people saying you're a bad person?" Grace held her daughter close. "Because some people don't understand what really happened. They think I did something wrong, but I didn't." "Then why don't they believe you?" "Because sometimes it's easier to believe bad things about people than good things. But you know the truth, don't you?" Lily nodded. "You gave soup to a man who was hungry." "That's right. That's all I did." "Then why are they being so mean?" Grace didn't have an answer for that. The hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning. Grace arrived at the courthouse at 8 a.m., wearing the same black dress she'd worn to the will reading. Arthur walked beside her, a folder full of documents tucked under his arm. Brandon and Victoria were already there, surrounded by a wall of lawyers. They didn't look at Grace. They didn't acknowledge her existence. The courtroom was packed. Press filled the gallery. Cameras waited outside. This was the biggest story in Chicago, maybe the country. A billionaire's fortune, a waitress's claim, a family at war. Judge Eleanor Hammond called the proceedings to order. We're here today to address a motion filed by Brandon and Victoria Sterling, challenging the last will and testament of William James Sterling. The petitioners claim that the decedent was subject to undue influence by the respondent Grace Elizabeth Mitchell. Mr. Carver, you may present your argument. Brandon's lead attorney stood. Harrison Carver was a legend in estate law. He had never lost a case. Your Honor, the facts of this case are simple. William Sterling was a dying man. He was in tremendous pain, heavily medicated, and desperate for comfort in his final days. Grace Mitchell exploited that vulnerability. Arthur objected. Your Honor, there's no evidence of exploitation. Let him finish, Mr. Chen. Carver continued. Ms. Mitchell encountered Mr. Sterling during one of his episodes. The deceased had been wandering the streets of Chicago, dressed as a homeless person, a clear sign of mental deterioration. Ms. Mitchell recognized an opportunity. She cultivated a relationship with the deceased, visited him in the hospital, and convinced him to change his will in her favor. This is textbook undue influence. Your Honor. Arthur stood. I have 37 video testimonies from Mr. Sterling affirming that he was not coerced. I have psychiatric evaluations from 3 independent physicians confirming his mental competence, and I have documentation proving that Ms. Mitchell had no knowledge of Mr. Sterling's identity until after the will was changed. That's convenient, Carver sneered. The respondent claims ignorance. But ask yourself, Your Honor, what's more likely, that a dying billionaire spontaneously decided to leave everything to a stranger he met once? Or that a woman struggling with debt and medical bills saw an opportunity and took it? I have evidence, Arthur said quietly. What evidence? Arthur opened his folder. Your Honor, I'd like to submit documents showing that Brandon Sterling rejected Grace Mitchell's job application 3 years ago on explicitly racist grounds. I'd also like to submit documents showing that Victoria Sterling personally denied a medical assistance application for Ms. Mitchell's dying daughter. The courtroom erupted. Judge Hammond banged her gavel. Order! Order in the court! Carver was sweating. Your Honor, these documents are irrelevant to the question of undue influence. On the contrary, Arthur replied. They go directly to the heart of why Mr. Sterling changed his will. He didn't change it because Ms. Mitchell manipulated him. He changed it because he discovered what his own children had done. He was horrified by their cruelty, and he made a conscious, deliberate decision to leave his fortune to someone who had demonstrated the values he wished his children possessed. Your Honor, I object to this characterization. I also have Mr. Sterling's final letter to his children, which I read at the will hearing. In it, he explicitly states his reasons for disinheriting Brandon and Victoria. Would you like me to read it into the record? Brandon was on his feet. This is a setup. Father was manipulated into writing those things. Mr. Sterling, sit down, or I'll have you removed. Brandon sat, his face twisted with fury. Judge Hammond studied the documents for a long moment. Then she looked up. Mr. Carver, your argument rests on the premise that Ms. Mitchell manipulated a mentally impaired man. But the evidence I'm seeing suggests that Mr. Sterling was fully competent and had very specific reasons for his decisions. Can you provide any evidence that Ms. Mitchell actually influenced his will? Carver hesitated. Your Honor, the circumstances themselves are evidence. A waitress inheriting billions of dollars from a man she met once. It defies logic. Logic is not evidence, Mr. Carver. We need more time to develop our case. You've had 3 weeks. What have you found? Carver glanced at Brandon. Brandon's face was stone. Your Honor, we request a continuance to gather additional evidence. Arthur stepped forward. Your Honor, the petitioners have had ample time to build their case. Every day this continues. Ms. Mitchell is denied access to resources that could help her daughter who has severe medical needs. The deceased specifically wanted this matter resolved quickly. I ask that you rule on the evidence presented today." Judge Hammond was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke. "I've reviewed the documentation provided by both parties. I've considered the video testimonies, the psychiatric evaluations, and the personal letters left by the deceased. I find no credible evidence that Grace Mitchell exercised undue influence over William Sterling. The will stands as written." Victoria screamed. No, this can't be right." "Ms. Sterling, control yourself. That woman is a fraud. She's a liar. She seduced my father and stole our inheritance." Judge Hammond's voice went cold. "Ms. Sterling, one more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt." Victoria collapsed into her seat sobbing. Brandon stood slowly. His face was calm now, too calm. "This isn't over, Your Honor. We'll appeal." "That's your right, Mr. Sterling. But I should warn you. The evidence submitted today will become public record, including the memo you wrote about Ms. Mitchell, and the documents showing your sister's denial of medical assistance to a dying child." Brandon's mask slipped for just a moment. Grace saw the fear beneath the arrogance. "We'll take that risk. Then I'll see you at the appellate hearing. Court is adjourned." Grace walked out of the courthouse into a sea of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. "Ms. Mitchell, how do you feel about the ruling? What will you do with the money? Do you have any message for the Sterling family?" Arthur guided her through the crowd toward a waiting car. Inside, Grace finally let herself breathe. "Is it over?" she asked. "Not yet. They'll appeal. They might drag this out for months. But today was a victory. A big one. The documents. They'll be published now. Tomorrow morning, every major news outlet will have them." Grace thought about Brandon's memo, Victoria's denial, the cruelty they'd shown to her and her daughter. "Good," she said quietly. "Let the world see who they really are." Arthur looked at her with something like respect. "You've changed, Grace." "No, I've just stopped being afraid." The car pulled away from the courthouse, leaving the chaos behind. Tomorrow the world would know the truth, and Grace Mitchell would begin building a new legacy on the ashes of the old one. The documents hit the press at 6 a.m. the next morning. By noon, Brandon Sterling's racist memo was the lead story on every major news network. By evening, Victoria's denial of medical assistance to a dying child had sparked nationwide outrage. By midnight, both of them had been forced to resign from their positions at Sterling Industries. Grace watched the coverage from her tiny apartment, Lily asleep in the next room. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing for hours. Reporters, lawyers, business executives, old friends she hadn't heard from in years. Everyone wanted a piece of the waitress who had just inherited a billion-dollar empire. She turned off her phone and sat in the darkness. This time yesterday, she had been worried about making rent. Now she owned buildings. Entire buildings. In cities she had never visited. The doorbell rang at 2 a.m. Grace froze. No one came to her door at 2 a.m. No one with good intentions. She crept to the peephole and looked through. Arthur Chen stood in the hallway looking exhausted. She opened the door. "Arthur, what's wrong?" "May I come in?" She stepped aside and he entered. He looked older than he had just hours ago. Something was weighing on him. "I just received word from my contacts at the FBI," Arthur said. "Brandon is being investigated for embezzlement. The evidence your father left was enough to open a federal case." Grace sat down slowly. "Federal case?" He could face up to 20 years in prison. The $4.2 million he stole from the Chicago Development Fund was just the beginning. My investigators found more. Much more. Hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands. Shell companies in Delaware. A pattern of fraud going back 15 years. "I didn't want this. I didn't want anyone to go to prison," You didn't cause this, Grace. Brandon caused this. He made choices. Now he's facing the consequences. And Victoria. Arthur's face darkened. That's why I'm here. Victoria is unstable. The public exposure has pushed her over the edge. She's been making threats. What kind of threats? Against you, against Lily. Grace's blood went cold. She threatened my daughter. She posted something online before her lawyers took it down. She said, and I quote, "That woman took everything from me. I'll take everything from her." Grace stood up so fast she knocked over her chair. Where is she? Where is she right now? We don't know. She disappeared from her apartment 3 hours ago. Her security team lost track of her. You're telling me a woman who threatened to hurt my daughter is missing? I have people looking for her. I've also arranged for additional security outside your building. No one will get in. Security didn't help when her people were stalking me for weeks. This is different. These are professionals. Former Secret Service. They won't let anything happen to you or Lily. Grace walked to Lily's bedroom door and opened it a crack. Her daughter was still sleeping peaceful and unaware. I can't do this, Arthur. I can't live like this, looking over my shoulder, wondering if today is the day someone hurts my child. I know. That's why I have a proposal. Grace turned back to him. What proposal? Leave Chicago. Tonight. I have a safe house in Vermont. Remote. Secure. You and Lily can stay there until things calm down. Run away. That's your solution. It's not running away. It's strategic retreat. Victoria is dangerous right now. Give her time to burn out, to make mistakes, to get herself arrested. Then come back when it's safe. Grace looked at her apartment. The water-stained ceiling, the peeling wallpaper, the place she'd called home for 6 years. I've never run from anything in my life. Then think of it as protecting your daughter. Whatever you need to call it to get yourself on that plane. Grace closed her eyes. William Sterling had given her a fortune. But that fortune came with a price. Enemies she had never asked for. Dangers she had never imagined. A life that was no longer her own. When do we leave? There's a car downstairs. Pack what you need. We'll be in Vermont by morning. 30 minutes later, Grace carried a sleeping Lily down to the waiting SUV. Her entire life fit into 2 suitcases. Everything else she left behind. As the car pulled away from the only home Lily had ever known, Grace looked back one last time. She had entered that building as a waitress struggling to survive. She was leaving as a billionaire on the run. The irony was not lost on her. The safe house in Vermont was nothing like Grace expected. She had imagined a cabin in the woods, isolated and primitive. Instead, Arthur's people drove them to a sprawling estate on a private lake. 6 bedrooms, a full staff, security cameras covering every inch of the property. This is temporary, Arthur said as Grace explored the main house, until Victoria is found. How long? Days, weeks, maybe longer, I don't know. Lily was delighted. She'd never seen a house this big, never had her own bathroom, never woken up to a view of mountains and water. Mama? Are we rich now? Grace didn't know how to answer that. We're safe, that's what matters. But are we rich? I suppose we are. Does that mean I can have a puppy? Grace laughed for the first time in days. Let's talk about that later, okay? For the first week, Grace did nothing but sleep and watch the news. The coverage was relentless. Brandon's arrest, Victoria's disappearance, the waitress who had inherited billions. Her face was everywhere. Arthur called every day with updates. Brandon has been denied bail. The judge considered him a flight risk. Victoria still hasn't been found. But there have been sightings. She's in the country. We'll find her. The board of Sterling Industries wants to meet with you. They need direction. They need leadership. That last call stopped Grace cold. Leadership. Arthur, I don't know anything about running a company. I can barely balance my checkbook. William believed you could learn. He believed in you. William was dying. He wasn't thinking clearly. William was thinking more clearly than he had in years. That's why he chose you. Not because you were qualified, but because you were kind. Because you had integrity. Because you were everything his children weren't. Grace sat down heavily. I can't do this. You can. You have to. 4,000 employees are depending on someone to guide that company. You can either step up or you can let it fall apart. Those are your only options. Grace thought about the employees, the secretaries, the janitors, the managers, the executives, people with families, people with mortgages, people counting on Sterling Industries to keep paying their salaries. She had never thought about them before. They had just been faceless parts of a machine she didn't understand. Now they were her responsibility. When do they want to meet? As soon as you're ready. I'm not ready. I'll never be ready. Then fake it until you are. 3 weeks after arriving in Vermont, Grace Mitchell flew to Chicago for her first board meeting as the owner of Sterling Industries. She wore a new suit, navy blue conservative professional. Arthur had helped her pick it out. He'd also spent hours prepping her on company history, financial statements, key personnel. Grace had absorbed maybe half of it. The rest was a blur of numbers and names that meant nothing to her. The boardroom was intimidating. 12 executives, all older, all male, all white. They looked at her with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. The chairman, a silver-haired man named Robert Hayes, spoke first. Ms. Mitchell, thank you for coming. I think I speak for everyone when I say this is an unusual situation. Unusual is one word for it. We've reviewed the will. The legal challenges have failed. You are now the sole owner of Sterling Industries. That's a fact we've had to accept. I sense a but coming. Hayes smiled thinly. But this company has been run by the Sterling family for 60 years. We have traditions, protocols, ways of doing things. We can't simply hand over control to someone with no experience. I'm not asking you to hand over anything. I'm asking you to help me learn. With all due respect, Ms. Mitchell, there are things that can't be learned from a book. Leadership, vision, the ability to make decisions that affect thousands of lives. Grace felt her temper rising. She pushed it down. Mr. Hayes, let me tell you something about myself. I've worked double shifts for 6 years to keep my daughter alive. I've made decisions on 4 hours of sleep that determined whether we ate that week or paid the electric bill. I've negotiated with landlords, doctors, debt collectors, and people who wanted to take everything I had. You want to talk about decisions that affect lives? I've been making those decisions every single day. Hayes's smile faded. This company has spent years being run by people who think leadership means giving orders from a corner office. William Sterling didn't build this company that way. He built it by working harder than anyone else, by caring more than anyone else, by never forgetting where he came from. Grace stood up and walked to the window. I don't know your protocols. I don't know your traditions. But I know that 4,000 people depend on this company for their livelihoods. And I know that I will do whatever it takes to protect them. If you want to help me, I welcome your expertise. If you want to fight me, I'll win, because I have nothing to lose and everything to gain. She turned back to face them. So what's it going to be? The room was silent. Finally, a woman at the far end of the table spoke. Grace hadn't noticed her before, the only other woman in the room. I'm Sarah Chen, Chief Operations Officer, and I think you're exactly what this company needs. Hayes glared at her. Sarah? No, Robert. Let me speak. Sarah stood. I've been with Sterling Industries for 23 years. I watched William build this company from nothing, and I watched his children nearly destroy it with their greed and their arrogance. She walked toward Grace. Brandon treated employees like numbers on a spreadsheet. Victoria treated the foundation like her personal piggy bank. They cared about nothing except their own wealth and status. And we all knew it. We all saw it. But we said nothing because we were afraid. Sarah stopped in front of Grace. You're not afraid. I can see that. And that makes you more qualified than anyone else in this room." Grace felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Sarah." "Don't thank me. Prove me right." The board meeting lasted another 3 hours. By the end, Grace had a basic understanding of the company's structure, its challenges, and its opportunities. She also had an ally in Sarah Chen who promised to guide her through the transition. As the executives filed out, Hayes approached her one last time. "You won today, Ms. Mitchell, but this company has survived for 60 years. It will survive you too." Grace looked him in the eye. "Mr. Hayes, I'm not trying to survive this company. I'm trying to transform it. Transform it into what? Something William Sterling would be proud of." Hayes had no response to that. 6 months later, everything had changed. Victoria Sterling had been found in Mexico living under a false name, her money running out. She was extradited to the United States and charged with making terroristic threats, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Her trial was scheduled for the following spring. Brandon's trial had already concluded. He was convicted on 12 counts of embezzlement and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. He appealed, lost, and was transferred to a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. Grace had visited him once. She didn't know why. Maybe she wanted to understand. Maybe she wanted closure. The visit lasted 7 minutes. "You destroyed my family," Brandon said through the glass. "Your family destroyed itself. I just inherited the wreckage. You're enjoying this, aren't you, watching us fall?" "No, I'm not enjoying anything about this. Your father loved you, Brandon. Even at the end he loved you. It broke his heart to do what he did." "Then why did he do it?" Grace thought about the question for a long moment. "Because love isn't the same as enabling. He saw what you had become, and he knew that giving you more money would only make it worse. He was trying to save you, in his own way." Brandon laughed bitterly. "Save me by taking everything. Save you by forcing you to face consequences, something no one had ever done before." "And what about you? What consequences do you face?" Grace stood up. "Every day, every single day I face the consequence of inheriting a responsibility I never asked for. But I'm trying to do right by it. That's all any of us can do." She walked out without looking back. 1 year after William Sterling's death, Grace Mitchell stood on a stage in downtown Chicago. Behind her was a building that hadn't existed 12 months ago. The William Sterling Community Health Center. Free health care for anyone who needed it. No questions asked. No bills. No debt collectors. Lily stood beside her holding her hand. The crowd was enormous. Press from every network. Politicians, business leaders, and hundreds of ordinary people who had come to see the waitress who had changed everything. Grace stepped to the microphone. "1 year ago, I was serving soup at a diner on the South Side. I didn't have health insurance. I couldn't afford my daughter's medication. I was 1 bad month away from losing everything." She paused. "Then I met a man who was hungry. A man who looked like he had nothing. I gave him soup because he needed it. I refused his money because I thought he needed it more than I did. That's all I did. That's everything I did." She looked out at the crowd. That man was William Sterling. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, he decided I was worthy of inheriting everything he had built. Not because I was qualified, not because I was smart, not because I had any idea what I was doing, but because I showed him kindness when he had nothing to offer in return. Grace felt tears streaming down her face. She didn't wipe them away. William used to say that kindness is the only currency that increases when you spend it. I didn't understand that then. I do now. She gestured to the building behind her. This center exists because one man believed that how we treat strangers defines who we are. It exists because he wanted his fortune to mean something, to help people, to heal people, to give people the dignity they deserve. She squeezed Lily's hand. My daughter almost died 3 years ago because I couldn't afford her treatment. I applied to the Sterling Foundation for help. I was denied. I've spent every day since then paying off that debt $1 at a time. Grace looked directly into the cameras. No one will ever be denied here. No child will ever die because their parents can't afford medication. No family will ever go bankrupt because someone got sick. That's my promise. That's William Sterling's legacy. The crowd erupted in applause. Grace stood in the noise holding her daughter's hand and let herself feel something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. After the ceremony, Arthur Chen found Grace standing alone by the building's entrance. That was a good speech. It was the truth, that's all. The board is impressed. Sarah tells me they're starting to believe in you. Starting to, that's progress. Arthur was quiet for a moment. There's something I never told you. What's that? The night William died, just before the end, he woke up for a few minutes. He asked me about you, about Lily, about whether you were safe. Grace's throat tightened. What did you tell him? I told him you were going to be fine, that you were stronger than you knew, that he had made the right choice. Did he believe you? He smiled, said he knew from the moment you pushed that $5 back into his hand. He said he'd never seen anyone do that before. Turn down money they desperately needed because someone else might need it more. Grace wiped her eyes. I didn't know who he was. That's exactly the point. You didn't know, and you still did the right thing. That's why he chose you, Grace. Because you're the same person whether anyone is watching or not. Grace looked at the building bearing William's name. I hope I'm living up to his faith. You are, every day, more than you know. That night, Grace took Lily back to their old apartment building on the south side. She had bought the building 6 months ago. Not to tear it down, not to flip it for profit, but to fix it. New plumbing, new heating, new everything. Rent frozen at exactly what the tenants had been paying before. Mrs. Patterson was waiting for them in the lobby. Grace Mitchell, look at you, all fancy now. Grace hugged her. Nothing fancy about me, Mrs. Patterson. Still the same person you used to babysit Lily for. I saw you on TV today. That speech you gave. Your mama would be so proud. Grace felt tears threatening again. You think so? I know so. She raised you right, Grace. Everything you're doing now, that came from her. From how she taught you to treat people. Lily tugged on Grace's hand. Mama, can we see our old apartment? It's not our apartment anymore, baby. Other people live there now. I know. I just want to see it. They took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Grace stood in the hallway, looking at the door she used to unlock every night after her shift. This is where we lived when everything changed, she said softly. Do you miss it? Grace thought about the question, the leaky ceiling, the thin walls, the constant worry about rent and food and medicine. I miss who we were. I miss how simple things were even when they were hard. Are things hard now? Different hard, better hard. Grace knelt down to look Lily in the eye. But no matter how much things change, I want you to remember something. We came from here. We came from nothing. And we should never, ever forget that. Why? Because that's what keeps us kind. Remembering where we came from. Remembering what it felt like to have nothing. That's what makes us help other people who have nothing now. Lily nodded solemnly. Like you helped that man with the soup. Exactly like that. 5 years later, Grace Mitchell stood in the office that used to belong to William Sterling. The Chicago skyline stretched out before her exactly as it had when William had looked out this same window and decided to test the world. She was 40 years old now. Lily was 13. Sterling Industries had doubled in size under her leadership. The foundation had built 17 community health centers across the country. Thousands of lives had been changed. Sarah Chen knocked on the door. Grace, the delegation from Washington is here. Send them in. The senator entered first, followed by his staff. Grace recognized him from television. He was leading a committee on healthcare reform. Ms. Mitchell, thank you for meeting with us. Thank you for coming. I'll get straight to the point. What you've built here, these health centers, this model of care, it's unlike anything we've seen. We want to take it national, federal funding, expansion to every state, but we need your help. Grace sat down behind William's desk. What kind of help? Expertise, leadership. Someone who understands how to make this work. Someone who can convince Congress that free health care isn't just possible, it's profitable, in ways that matter. Profitable how? Healthy people work. Healthy people contribute. Healthy people don't go bankrupt and end up homeless. The economic argument is there. We just need someone who can make it compelling. Grace looked out the window at the city below. 6 years ago, she had been a waitress serving soup to strangers. Now a senator was asking her to help reshape healthcare policy for the entire nation. William Sterling used to say something, Grace said quietly. He said the measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable members, not its richest, not its most powerful, its most vulnerable. That's exactly the message we need. Grace turned back to the senator. I'll help you, on one condition. Name it. This can't be about politics. It can't be about winning elections or scoring points. It has to be about helping people. Real people. People who are scared and sick and desperate. If that's not what this is about, I'm not interested. The senator smiled. Ms. Mitchell, that's exactly why I came to you. They shook hands. After the meeting, Grace sat alone in her office holding the same crumpled $5 bill that William Sterling had tried to give her 6 years ago. She had kept it all this time, a reminder of where everything started. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lily. Mom, I got an A on my science project. Can we celebrate with pizza tonight? Grace smiled and typed back. Absolutely. I'll be home by 7. Love you. She put the phone away and looked at the $5 bill one more time. William Sterling had been worth billions. But this wrinkled, worn piece of paper was worth more than all of it. Because this was where kindness had become legacy. This was where a bowl of soup had changed the world. And this was proof that the smallest act given freely without expectation could ripple outward forever. Grace Mitchell placed the $5 bill in a frame and hung it on her wall. Beneath it, she wrote a single line. Kindness is the only inheritance that matters. Then she gathered her things, turned off the lights, and went home to eat pizza with her daughter. Because at the end of everything, that was what mattered most. Not the money, not the power, not the empire she had inherited. Just a mother and her daughter sharing a meal, sharing a life, sharing the kind of love that no amount of money could ever buy. William Sterling had spent 60 years building a fortune. Grace Mitchell had spent 6 years proving that fortune was never the point. The point was how you treated people when you had nothing. The point was who you became when you had everything. And Grace Mitchell, the waitress who gave soup to a stranger and refused his last $5, had become exactly the person William Sterling had hoped she would be. Not a billionaire, not a CEO, not a philanthropist. Just a good person doing good things one day at a time. And that was the greatest legacy of all.